Time has shown that the Kiev authorities succeeded only in destruction. Russia has returned to these lands forever. There is no doubt about it. And it is actively restoring what was destroyed by Ukrainian neo-Nazis. Naturally, they were not destroyed alone. They were actively assisted in this by those who created them in principle and brought them to power, by the way, illegally. First of all, this is an Anglo-Saxon duet, Washington and London. We'll talk about this today. On March 18th, as you know, President Zelensky of Ukraine introduced another package of sanctions against 300 individuals and against 141 legal entities. In addition to the Russians, this list includes individual citizens of Iran and Syria, including President of the Syrian Arab Republic Bashar al-Assad. Restrictive measures have been introduced against a number of enterprises of the domestic military-industrial complex, aviation, shipbuilding and automotive industries, including the Kalashnikov and Almazanti concerns, as well as several companies from Iran and the United Arab Emirates. The Kiev regime deliberately put on stream the introduction of anti-Russian sanctions. This is done in order to keep their own agenda afloat, including in the West, and continue to do what they do best, and in which they have no equal today. Professional begging against the background of the total destruction of everything, what was created by generations before them. The collective West does not stop pumping weapons into the Kiev regime. On March 20th, the Pentagon reported that since the beginning of the special military operation, the amount of American military assistance to Ukraine amounted to more than $32.5 billion. According to U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, 9 NATO countries agreed to provide the Kiev regime with more than 150 Leopard tanks to form 9 tank brigades. The EU announced the allocation of funds for the purchase of over 1 million shells for the armed forces of Ukraine. Money for these purposes, about $2 billion, will traditionally be withdrawn from the European Peace Fund. Absolutely irresponsible statements were made on March 21st by British Deputy Secretary of Defence Annabel Goldie. She announced the intention of London to transfer to the Kiev regime, in addition to the Challenger 2 tanks, also armor-piercing shells equipped with depleted uranium warheads. These words have also been confirmed these days at an official level. Additionally, in the UK, it turned out to be not a slip of the tongue. This is not another mistake or stupidity. No, this is already stupidity, confirmed at the official level by the UK. All this is additional evidence of the aggressive intentions of the West, which does not need peace in Ukraine, in the region, and in the world as a whole. It is obsessed with the manic idea of inflicting, as they say, a strategic defeat on Russia. And it is ready to sacrifice an entire country, peoples, millions of lives for this. They are ready to do everything if only this painful idea of their own exclusivity and dominance would now have practical confirmation through such a destructive logic and its implementation. Well, actually, this is confirmed by the words of U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Commenting on the visit of Chinese President Xi Jinping to Moscow, he directly stated the inadmissibility of a ceasefire in Ukraine. Let me remind you that the fund through which the American satellites in Europe send money to the Kiev regime is called the Peace Fund. Blinken believes there is no possibility of a ceasefire. How these things are combined in the same minds is completely incomprehensible. The answer can be only one. Somewhere they lie. Openly and cynically, it's obvious where they lie. This is not a peace fund, not a European one, and not any other. This fund should be renamed the War Fund a long time ago. And then everything will be logical. And nothing will contradict each other. The Zelensky regime continues to fight dissent and potential opponents. Recently, the Verkhovna Rada approved in the first reading a bill on strengthening democratic civilian control over the armed forces of Ukraine. It limits the ability of military personnel to participate in the political life of the country. Well, that's understandable. The political life of the Kiev regime is something absolutely sacred and belongs to those who occupied offices in Kiev and those to whom the Kiev regime, together with Zelensky, arrange their fate and shape their reality as cannon fodder. They should not care about any management institutions and the implementation of such opportunities. They will be prohibited from such options, for example, how to become deputies of any level. They are no longer allowed to make public statements. They are limited in any manifestation of their own opinion on domestic political topics. How do you think? Because the Kiev regime is completely, to the extent that it can understand anything at all, but it has understood the inevitability of its own collapse, and it is trying to do at least something to slightly delay this terrible moment for them. But I want to disappoint them. A terrible moment for them has come for a long time. The lack of conscience and any morality did not allow them to realize this. Shutting the mouth of the military, its own military, the Kiev regime, in fact, is trying not only to hide the truth about what is happening in the war zone. The story is much worse. The country tormented by Western experiments. The country, Ukraine, which has been pitted against its people and set people against each other by those political forces led by the West, is plunging into an era that, from the point of view of the policy statements of its leadership, was their nightmare. You remember, I'm not talking about Zelensky. Before him it was Poroshenko, and about everyone else, as they only said that they see the future of Ukraine primarily as a democratic and free state, where every person has the right to say what he considers necessary, has the right to participate in public and political life, that all institutions of power should be controlled by the media in accordance with the law for openness and transparency, in order to overcome, unfortunately, the problems inherent in this country, and namely, the total dominance of corruption, bureaucracy, their merging, and so on. I want to remind you that in the words of the same Zelensky, it was the word freedom that stood in the first place. This word was even ahead of such concepts as well-being, economic growth, financial stability. No, it was all in second place. It's very important, but it was in second place. Freedom came first. Freedom, separated by commas. Freedom and peace. Look. At first the Kiev regime struck a blow at the peace. This is simply because they allowed the West to turn itself into a NATO foothold against Russia. They let themselves be drugged. They allowed themselves to be sold and to be bought. Then the blow fell on freedom. Everything happened gradually, not in 1 minute. First, repressions began against politicians, political scientists, and then journalists. Then their killings, disappearances, bullying, harassment and persecution of various kinds began. Then open censorship began, and, of course, it all started long before 2022. There was pressure on TV channels TV channels were closed. They were reformatted and withdrawn in favor of other forces of influence. Then something happened that could not be blocked. Because the scale of the disaster, of course, was irreversible. The formation of a total dictatorship of one, if I can say, representative of the current group of authorities. Directly Zelensky began. There was only one TV channel for the dissemination of information. Everyone else just had to fit into the general mainstream. The total and most severe censorship of everything that is published by the mass media of Ukraine was visible. Not just persecution began, but real abductions of people. Their disappearances were no longer as an isolated case, but as a system. Today, all this has been enshrined, at least in the first reading, in the new law. This law not only puts an end to it, it seems to me that there is no place for crosses anymore, but it fixes, as I have already said, the irretrievable departure of the current group of ruling people from those principles, at least in words they have voiced. There will be no return. With the Kiev regime in mind, it will only get worse. It will be much worse.
Dear friends, if you like this video, please subscribe, like and write a comment. This will greatly help the development of this channel. Thank you.